Okay, you're live.
Hey guys. So I'll go ahead and pop up some slides here, and then I'm going to show some demos. But my name's Cale Teeter. I'm from Microsoft. I work exclusively in the blockchain space at Microsoft. I work in engineering with our product group. I'm actually in a division called DX, so I work with our startup partners. So most of the stuff, if you're familiar with what we've been working on in blockchain, as far as from an Azure perspective, most of that stuff I had a hand in getting up there. But I'll just give you a couple slides about kind of what we're doing, kind of what's the future of what we've been working on, as well as kind of show you where to go find things to start using some of the services that we have out there. So basically, I'm just going to not try to go into some of the 101 stuff with blockchain because I assume a lot of people are familiar with that. But just from a high level, where Microsoft is kind of injecting themselves in this ecosystem is we started out with blockchain 1.0, which was kind of like around simple ledgers and value transfer. You can think of that more like the Bitcoin days back in 2009 as those things kind of evolved. The ledger system, which was a core blockchain, was created and kind of grew up from there. From there, we've gone to blockchain 2.0 technology, which I would say is more akin to something like Ethereum and some of the other private consortium-based blockchains that we're seeing out there in the market today. These are injecting a bit more than just pure value transfer. They're actually doing things like injecting code. So in the Ethereum case of a smart contract, we're seeing other vendors and partners trying to inject different ways to kind of do that smart contract logic or that code logic. And then we kind of evolved from there. And I would say that was right around the Ethereum days. These kind of things kind of sparked off. And then to current day, if we fast forward to that, where we see it as more of a blockchain 3.0, which is, now we have ways to run distributed compute through this. We have ways to do the value transfer. The immutable aspects are really great about blockchain. But there are some things that we see where we can kind of help out from that perspective. So I think Microsoft's vision here isn't really to kind of create the next blockchain that's going to be, or the next consensus algorithm even. We certainly have researchers that work on those kind of things, but the idea is really around the middleware components and how can we add value to make these things both easier to run, as well as kind of handle things like all the ancillary services that go around these to make these real, especially in an enterprise case. There's a lot of things you have to think about from like a deployment, DevOps perspective, as well as just things like simply key management. And I'll talk through some of those here in a second. But the tenets for our strategy when we first kind of started on this was, fail fast and cheap. So we have multiple ways to kind of do that operation. We have our dev test labs, which you can go up into Azure. I can show you where to find those, and you can kind of try out different flavors of blockchains and whatnot. You can also, the idea there is to spin something up quickly, get a feel for how it works, and see if it's something that you kind of want to start developing on top of. From there, we evolved to formally, like in our marketplace, where we have offerings that are both in kind of demo form. So some of these offerings we actually have up there show a full-scale demo. So you can kind of play with it. You don't even have to write any code. You can actually just go use it. As opposed to some of them are more like dev frameworks that allow you to start to build stuff on top of it, on top of the blockchain, that is. And then there's others that are really just like kind of more like production blockchains, where you can basically say, I want these many miners or these many voters, depending on what kind of chain you're running. You give us a set of parameters, and I'll step through that here in a second. And basically, we'll spin the infrastructure up. So kind of making it just easy for people. If you've done this in the past, if you set up blockchains, you know that the development alone is something to kind of get your head around. And then when you start thinking about, I got to configure guest nodes in an Ethereum case or whatnot, I got to figure all these nodes out and this peer-to-peer networking, these discovery things. It's a lot to kind of consume at once. And so we're really just saying, hey, if you're a developer, you're coming into this, we can spin you up a blockchain quickly, and you can start to develop and be productive from that side. If you want to get involved in the infrastructure piece of it, obviously we have an open platform with that as well. The idea is to mix and match some of the best technologies out there. Again, we're working with the leading startup people in this space in blockchain, and we've been since the beginning. So we have, and it's not just, I mentioned some stuff about Ethereum before, it's not just about Ethereum. We have offers in the marketplace right now that use Bitcoin network as their backend. So we're not really tied to a specific blockchain. We're really thinking about it from a platform perspective, making it easy to use. Obviously, creation and innovation. We can share these solutions worldwide through the Azure Marketplace and through our cloud, and be able to do this one click. We call it deployment, so you can quickly iterate and provision. This slide kind of brings everything together, and I have this in a couple slides, but basically, if you look at the stack on the right side, basically the model that we're following is that we start at the bottom. We have our cloud, our Azure, which can run like the traditional cloud that's running up there on the internet. We also have a product called Stack that runs on premises. So for those people, and a lot of people are interested in that, they don't just want to run everything in the cloud, they want some stuff in a hybrid type solution on premises. And so in that model, basically they're the same. So our Azure Stack product has the same API as Azure does. So we started building, and this is what we spent probably the better part of last year building out, was working with all the leading kind of blockchains in this space. We're still adding more. So we keep adding as they come along, these blockchains up there, both single node form as well as like scale out form, like a consortium network type. And I'll show you some of the offerings we have up there now, but you can think of that more like infrastructure, just getting the thing running. And then we start to move up the stack, which is kind of where we're focused right now. A lot of effort right now inside Microsoft on this. And this is really around the value add services in the middle to make these things real for an enterprise. So in order for you to consume it, it's not just about running a distributed ledger or a blockchain. It's about let's talk about keys, for instance. How do I manage the identities that are going to use with this system? I obviously can't just go in and gut everything in an enterprise and say, this is a new identity system, you should trust it, and it works well. We have to integrate with existing technologies, such as things like Azure AD and even some of the federated identities that exist out there on the internet. So we have things that we're working on from the identity and key services perspective. We have crypto services, we call it, which is kind of like a bucket for a lot of the work that, if you've seen any of our work, Marley Gray and the engineering team has been working through. And that's really about off-chain processing and storage. So quickly you'll find as you start working with these solutions that there's different scaling characteristics about a blockchain than there is about a traditional client-server type application or a web-based application. And really that's around what pieces belong on the chain and which pieces don't. And the ones that don't belong on the chain or don't necessarily need to be there, how do we handle them and still provide that good aspects of blockchain, like the security component? And that's where we're kind of working with Intel and SGX on the secure enclave architecture and how that will work together with these things we call cryptlets, which will essentially allow you to kind of take some of your code and put it off chain and still do it in a secure manner. So essentially the blockchain could provision a secure enclave to run that. So we have some trust there. It's not just a server that's standing up on the internet running code for us. Beyond that, we're looking to do some stuff in machine learning and BI space. And when I say looking, I mean there's active work happening here right now, both from integration into things like cryptlets. So you can imagine that in prediction type markets as a workload, they need a lot of this kind of juice around machine learning in order to do their tasks. And how do we build the integration such that we can do that securely, such as a cryptlet being able to talk to something that one of our scientists has put together in machine learning. So maybe they write some R code, they deploy it to machine learning space, and we can actually use our key vault as an HSM to allow these things to kind of talk together. So lots of work that we're working on there. The identity space is kind of huge in that space as well. I work directly with our identity team on the products we're starting to build out there for the platform as well. And so we have some use cases. We've been building some early models of how that stuff works, from full decentralized model, as well as some next generation identity platforms. Daniel Butchner, if you do a search for him on the internet, you'll see he's one of the leads on that team. He has a lot of things on GitHub as well. So if you're interested in looking what we're doing with decentralized identity, a lot of that stuff's in the clear up there on GitHub, so you can take a look at that. And then at the top of the stack is really where it meets the road. This is where our customers are actually at, or the enterprise is asking, this is my application, and this is how I think blockchain could help in my application. Maybe they're not even in the weeds with ECC algorithms and the different consensus algorithms that are involved, but they understand the core aspects that blockchain's bringing to the space. And so our job is kind of also helping in that space to be able to wire these things together, provide both marketplace, for our first party components, as well as like some of our partners. Some of them are listed on the slide here, but as well as doing POCs and being able to wire those together into solutions to make it easy for us to kind of repeat those things and allow customers to consume them more easily. So some of the things we've been doing in the model we've been following as we've been going along here is not for us to go away, obviously, into a cave and try to build what we think blockchain makes sense. It's really to create this big feedback loop that talks directly to the end users as well as the startups and the people who are actually engaged in this space. So we have a core group in engineering in Microsoft who's working on first-party components. You've seen probably some of that stuff being published, but that stuff's all driven directly off of startups and customers' feedback. So as we're basically collecting all that feedback from them, saying, "Man, I wish I would do this," or "How do I manage keys in this way? How do I do my compute in this way?" Like, for instance, one of the things that actually got driven from that was the Cryptlet technology. If you think about a smart contract, when we publish that out there, there's really no kind of security around someone taking a look at that bytecode and seeing what your business logic was. And maybe that's important to you to kind of allow people to use the service, but maybe not view all source at that level. Again, this is kind of different from a public blockchain space. In public blockchain, it totally makes sense because it's a total trustless model. In a private context, like where we're working in a consortium between multiple companies, there is some level of trust there. And I think this is the blurry line where we're trying to help those enterprises adapt technology that's really great on the trustless model into their systems. And so that fed directly in there. They said, man, if we could just like kind of hide the business logic we're doing here, but allow people to actually execute it, how could we do that securely? And that's part of what we're doing there. Again, we're driving partner innovation and scale through the tools and the pre-configured solutions we have in the marketplace. I'll show you that in a second, so we can just skip over that. But basically, it's just a one-stop portal. People can come up and do a search and find the different aspects we're working on. I could probably jump over that. We kind of went through this, but really, this is just focused on that middle section, the middleware section, the identity and certificate services, encryption services that we're working with, some of the gateway services and data services. Again, thinking through what belongs on the chain, what doesn't belong on the chain, and how can we make these things scale appropriately for the scenario. If somebody comes to you and says they need to do, 1,000 transactions a second, that's going to be a challenge for something right out of the box from blockchain. And so we have to kind of think outside the box there, using existing technology or using some of these new technologies like state channels and some of the things that are being evolved like that off-chain. But also, how can we inject and help in that space with Cryptlet technology in the secure enclave environment? This is kind of a marketing slide, but really it's just showing like that we're kind of open up there in Azure. It's not just about Windows, obviously. Most of the stuff that we actually run on is Linux-based from an infrastructure standpoint. So Ubuntu, CoreOS, a lot of stuff on Docker that we're running up there. Again, driven from the startup community, and really I'm there kind of helping them make sure that we can build that in an optimal fashion to make sure it runs fast and can kind of scale and make it easy for customers. So I put some links out here and we can share this deck out, but basically if you want to get started with this stuff from an end user or developer perspective, a lot of different things out here. We have the marketplace, and I'll show you that here in a second with the screens. And but we also have built some stuff into Visual Studio and some of our dev platform. So that's kind of another aspect of this. We talked about the middleware and kind of the ecosystem around a blockchain and an decentralized application. We've also built integration into our Visual Studio product, and we're going to continue to kind of evolve that as well as VS Code to make it easy for people to develop on top of. I do have a couple slides about development in here, and I'll run through those really quickly. I know we're tight on time, but the landscape is kind of really around multiple different things that it takes when you start doing blockchain development. One of the first is the frameworks that are involved. It's kind of fragmented. I mean, there's quite a lot out there. I listed some of the popular ones here like Truffle and Ethereum, Tendermint, Tyrion's got some frameworks out there as well. We have in the middle tier kind of the blockchains. So we have things like Strato from BlockApps. We have Chain.com with their Chain Core product out there. Big Chain DB, and then also some of the emulation type models like the Test RPC from Tim Coulter, as well as Hyperledger is something too that we're looking to kind of facilitate the use of and be able to run that easier. From an ID perspective, we basically have, again, a mix of tools from everything from full enterprise tools like Visual Studio and VS Code up through all the lightweight editors like Sublime and Atom and Emacs and all that type of thing. We also have some products like Ethereum Studio from EtherCamp, which is kind of a dev box and it's like a dev studio in a box. You can just fire the thing up. You have a complete environment with a test and blockchain to work against, and then you can actually turn that in and start publishing to public chains or other private chains. Cosmo being an online type editor, and Mix, which has now evolved into what's called Remix, is an editor as well that's very popular. Real quick, from a developer flow perspective, where we see the DevOps kind of stumbles right now and things that trying to help out there is when we deploy a smart contract, we actually, when you do a single smart contract based application or whatnot, there's just one asset there that you're publishing. But the reality is in production, that's not the case. The case is these things will be linked, similar to library type flows that we've seen in the past. And the problem is keeping track of all that thing. So we can't break that chain because the things that are being published on the blockchain are mutable. So if we change something in the middle of this flow, we actually have to republish every piece that's dependent on it and make sure that we don't break anything from that perspective. Truffle's done a lot of work there. We also are building some tooling around keeping track of that stuff to make it easier. Couple architecture diagrams just to tell you the differences from some of the stuff we have in the marketplace. So BlockApps is a kind of an interesting product because it's not a traditional blockchain in the perspective of we have a JSON RPC endpoint there. In this reality, we actually have an API. So the BlockApps guys have said, hey, we could build a blockchain called Strato as the name of their product. And then they went ahead and built an SDK. And they also have another application called Block that can sit on top of that. And essentially what it does is makes like an API in front of a blockchain. So instead of you having to deal with a different protocol, the thought was enterprise developers are used to REST APIs and things like that. Can we make a blockchain that works in that fashion, but still provide the immutability aspects and the distributed nature of the ledger? So that's really what their product's around. Really cool product. It's up there in the marketplace. Truffle is a dev framework type tool. I mentioned like kind of a dev box in the cloud. You can spin this up. You can run it locally, but we have one that's already pre-configured with all the bits you see here on the screen. Essentially what you have here is you can talk to a testnet, public Ethereum. I also have the test RPC thing sprinkled up here as a client. That can be your blockchain as well from your app. Truffle is basically providing some glue to keep track of your smart contracts as you're doing deployments. And it does a lot of real nice work around migrations and the dev flow and kind of DevOps flow through the system. So as you're writing unit tests and things like that, it can help automate that. So Tim's built a lot of good pieces into that tooling. And actually, we're looking to partner a little bit deeper with him to integrate that into IDEs to make it even easier to use. So working on that. And Visual Studio, the initial round we did here was basically working with Strato, with the BlockApps guys to basically make that more single click because there's a couple pieces you need to kind of spin up in order to make that work. We basically were saying we really would like it to be you just pop into Visual Studio and start writing Solidity code and then can do a deployment right there without having to jump around to 3 different tools to do it. So in this case, we built some templates inside of Visual Studio as well as some glue to allow it to talk to blockchains. We've integrated Solidity, one of the popular smart contract languages, into Visual Studio, so you get the normal things for an IDE like text highlighting and indentation and things like that. We're also looking to kind of from a future perspective, what else are we working on from a DevTools perspective? The debuggers are still a bit kind of hard to use in our eyes, so we're looking to see if we can improve on that by working with obviously the existing tooling that's out there, but seeing how we can kind of improve on that to make the debugging experience more easy. Right now it's a bit, you have to kind of run something and look at the output and see what happened, and it can be a time-consuming experience. More templates, better tooling around those kind of things. We're looking into this concept, and Ethereum has kind of been building on this too with the library concept to be able to publish known good smart contracts to alleviate some of the need of, and promote code reuse as opposed to sitting at a blank slate every time and starting from that. So looking to use the same models that people are familiar with IDEs, where we have references that we can just reference out to known good code chunks and allow people to kind of use those. Smart contract migrations for updates to allow the simulation, or at least the appearance from a developer as it being an update, as opposed to scorched earth when we have to kind of blow away a smart contract and put it back in. I'm going to jump out real quick here then to the marketplace. Give me 1 second here. So actually, if you just pop into portal.azure.com is our main management portal. If you don't have an account, you can go sign up for one. It's free for 30 days, I believe. They give you a bunch of money for the free. If you have an MSDN account, you get credits for every month that you can use for free. And then obviously there's a pay-as-you-go model as well. But essentially, once you come into here, it's kind of free to use the thing until you start provisioning things. We can basically come into this little plus sign up here in the top corner. We could type in things like Ethereum or blockchain or any of that stuff. So if I type in blockchain, you'll see a bunch of them come up in the quick list there, and then you'll see the search results actually come back here in a second, which shows all the stuff that we have running out there right now. If you go under the blockchain category over here, it basically just has all the categories that we have, like all the different tooling that we have. What's interesting is we have a couple different categories we've been working on, like, let me back up here a second. So if you just go into blockchain from here, hit see all, you can see everything we're doing. Basically, we have a distributed ledger subcategory, and then we have a tooling category. So we're working with BlockStack from the identity and naming perspective. ETHCamp I mentioned from a dev tools in a box, and Truffle as well as a great DevOps tool to work with. Distributed ledger technology, bit more of those up here, and this is continuing to expand. These are everywhere from Chain and Corda from R3. This is the Ethereum consortium blockchain is one we put up there as Microsoft, but it's using the public Ethereum clients in a private setting. So we can basically run a private blockchain. Parity, Quorum's a big one that just came out from JP Morgan Chase that's working with the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. It's a very interesting one because it allows you to do private transactions as well. So really easy. And this one's a demo form right now. So this spins up essentially a 7-node network on a single VM and allows you, it does some transactions by default. You can take a look at it, see how it actually functions, and looking to put a bigger template out similar to the Ethereum consortium blockchain. I'll show you what that looks like right now. So when you come into these things, they give you a little description about what they are. There's a detailed walkthrough, which actually goes out to another web page. I'll let it load up here. We'll come back to that in a sec, but that just goes out to a web page that walks you through kind of like almost a lab to show you what's going on. You can get details here. When you come in to create one of these, essentially what we've done is kind of scripted out the infrastructure. So you can come in and start to fill in, how do I want to run this thing? So you give it a prefix, we'll give it a VM name. This is the user account that we'll use to sign into our VMs. We pick our subscription if you have multiple. Resource group is really just a tag to basically group everything that we're going to deploy here so we could easily delete it and manage it. We pop into, and we've kind of customized Azure to do these kind of things for us. So things specific to running a blockchain would be, in the Ethereum sense, is we want to know how many consortium members are going to be a part of this. Obviously, it makes sense for there to be more than one if we're building a consortium, so let's just leave it at 2. We have our mining nodes, because this is running a proof of work algorithm. We pick how many mining nodes we want. We can pick what's the storage performance we want, what kind of DR do we want on this. From a storage perspective, do we need to replicate it to different regions? We can pick the size of the virtual machine, so we can control how fast, what the compute is on the machine. And then the same thing for the transaction nodes. We can pick all those. I'll leave them at default for now just to show you the kind of walkthrough here. And then in the Ethereum settings, we can basically do things that are specific to Ethereum. So things like the network ID that we're using for our private network, the Ethereum user account that we're going to use for the first account that we create in there, and then also a key phrase that we use to do some generation of the node IDs in there. It's basically like a randomized function. Once we go through all those, and I'll just step through this so you can see what it looks like. You can type the password, right? And these are enforcing kind of best practices around, passwords and redundancy and things like that. So we basically take care of spinning up and putting load balancers in front of the transaction nodes, putting NSGs, which are kind of like ACLs, to block things like mining nodes by default. We probably don't want our mining nodes to be on the internet if we're doing a private blockchain, but maybe the transaction nodes are okay to absorb transactions in from. Essentially, once we do that, we can see a summary screen of what's going to happen. So this is going to tell us, do we have enough cores to run this in our subscription and all that kind of thing. You'll get a little validation pass after a minute. You can hit OK, and then in this case it says buy, but there's nothing to buy here other than the cost of running these virtual machines. For our partners who want to kind of monetize maybe an algorithm or something that they have running on top of there, we have provisions to allow them to charge, based on the VM size and whatnot, if they want to charge customers for that kind of thing. I'm not going to click on that. It takes about 5 minutes and it'll spin up a consortium network for you. But in the interest of time, I'll just let that go. The other piece we have out here is we call it ACOM, which is our marketplace out here. It's showing the same offerings that we have here, but you can get a bit more detail about it. So if you want to see diagrams about what the thing is, remember I clicked on that thing before, that link inside of there. It comes out to this page. There's a PDF there that kind of walks you through what's going on there. And that's a typical kind of model that we flow throughout our system. So lots of info. It'll kind of give you some telemetry around like what categories or what's this thing kind of surfacing up for us, what's the pricing of it. So all the details about how to run these kind of things up there. And I know we're at 4:30, so I didn't want to take over too much, but I'll go ahead and wrap it up. If there's questions or anything we need to do, just let me know, guys.
Yeah, that was a great presentation. Thank you so much. So we're going to transition to the next talk, but we'll take the questions offline and through the IRC.